Welcome back, guys. AnimeScale here. After the video on Naruto's top 20 jutsu, a lot of you have been asking me to make the same video for Sasuke. Well, today, we're going to do just that. Now, there are a couple of things to keep in mind, though. Sure, some of the rankings will be based on how strong the jutsu is, but just as important will be how useful that jutsu has been to Sasuke in the show. Lastly, I'm including only techniques Sasuke can do on his own, so the crazy Chibaku Tensei against Kaguya or the majestic attire Susanoo won't be making it here. Now, let's start the list. We're going to have quite a few versions of the Chidori here, and we're starting off with the Chidori Current. This is pretty much a larger area version of the Chidori, where Sasuke throws lightning everywhere around him. This thing is nowhere near as strong as a regular Chidori, but it has two advantages. It can both hit many people at the same time, and it's a pretty decent defense. You don't exactly want to charge someone shooting lightning, right? Sasuke didn't really use this technique much during the show. He only used it during the first part of Shippuden. It only just barely makes it onto the list. Next up, we have the Chidori Blade. This one is interesting because most people forget this is even a thing. It's a shame, considering just how cool this thing looks. It's pretty much just Sasuke channeling the Chidori's lightning through his blade, making it much, much deadlier. The most obvious benefit of this is that it has a longer range than a normal Chidori, while being about the same in terms of strength. Sasuke doesn't use this jutsu that much. In fact, we've only seen him use this a few times. Still, he's been using it all the way from Shippuden to Boruto, so he obviously thinks it's still useful, so it just barely edges out the Chidori Current. Shuriken Jutsu refers to a lot of things involving the use of Shuriken to pressure and whittle away at people. Someone like Itachi could use Shuriken to hit people he couldn't even directly see, and Sasuke definitely took after his brother. Using Shuriken Jutsu, Sasuke was able to pressure Itachi himself. In the Land of Waves arc, it was Shuriken Jutsu that let Sasuke and Naruto free Kakashi from Zabuza. Even as an adult, Sasuke used this technique against Momoshiki, and he was more than a little frustrated by it. Sasuke also ended up using Shuriken to surprise Ishiki himself. It more than earns a place on this list. Now we have the Fireball Jutsu, one of the signature jutsu of the Uchiha. There isn't exactly a lot to go over. I mean, it's just a big fireball. Now, I know what a lot of you are going to say. Sasuke's pretty much been using this thing from the first time we saw him. So why is it so far down this list? Well, while this jutsu was often used by Sasuke in the first part of the show, we see him using it less frequently in the War arc and in Boruto. The main reason is that Sasuke has a more powerful form of fire with Amaterasu and Kagutsuchi that is not only stronger, but also a lot more versatile. However, Sasuke used the jutsu against Naruto in the final valley and against Shin in Boruto, proving that this jutsu is still useful to this day. The Dragon Flame is, well, pretty much a fireball in the shape of a dragon. It seems to travel faster and it presumably hits harder, unless Sasuke just uses this thing because it looks cool. Which, fair enough. From what I know, we haven't actually seen Sasuke seriously using this technique to fight someone. So why is it on the list? Well, this jutsu has a much more important function. By spamming this technique, Sasuke can set up perfect conditions he needs to use Kirin, one of his strongest and coolest techniques. For that alone, this jutsu is more useful than everything before it. Up next, my personal favorite variant of the Chidori, Chidori Spear. It isn't really all that complex. Sasuke manipulates the Chidori to extend it from his hands, turning it into a long-range spear. The range increase is nothing crazy, but it's enough to allow Sasuke to safely use this technique without being in any danger himself. The reason why that's so important is that the Chidori has always been something you can only use with the Sharingan. The move leaves you open, and if you miss, you're probably not going to live to regret it. Sasuke used this jutsu against Orochimaru, Deidara, and Danzo, with the latter mortally wounded by this technique. The summoning jutsu needs no introduction. With some chakra, you can summon pretty much anything you've made a contact with. At the beginning of Shippuden, Sasuke had Manda, the same snake that held his own against both Gamabunta and Katsuyu. This snake was the reason Sasuke survived Deidara's C0 explosion thanks to the reverse summon. Later in the war, we see Sasuke summoning another huge snake, Aoda. That was useful to get closer to the Ten Tails and avoid the Jubi minions. But this summon has become less useful ever since Sasuke Susanoo developed to its full body form, but it's still nothing to sneeze at. The Curse Mark is pretty much a giant reserve of power that Sasuke can draw on anytime he needs a boost during an important fight. Now, the first stage of the Curse Mark is a big boost in power, but it isn't even worth talking about compared to Stage 2. In Stage 2, Sasuke went from getting destroyed by one-tailed Naruto to more than equaling him. That's a crazy boost in strength. Sasuke used the Curse Mark pretty often, only losing it in his fight against Itachi. There's no doubt he'd still be using it if he had it. It definitely deserves a high spot on this list. After getting the Rinnegan, Sasuke got the two halves of its gravity manipulation powers. Bansho Tenin just pulls anyone Sasuke wants closer to him, letting Sasuke use one of his shorter range attacks. This pull is no joke either. Unless you have some way of negating it, you are definitely going to get pulled in. This jutsu makes several of Sasuke's shorter range jutsus a lot more useful, so it's definitely more of a supporting technique than anything else we've talked about so far. The single strongest fire style jutsu will never stop burning until it completely destroys anything it sets on fire. Amaterasu was one of the strongest techniques in the first part of Naruto, but then we started seeing people dodging it, blocking it, globbing it off, or absorbing it. Sure, if you're not as fast as a Raikage, or if you aren't in a select group of people, with a Rinnegan or Karma, then the Amaterasu is definitely one of the most dangerous techniques out there. But in the War Arc and in Boruto, this jutsu resulted in being a waste of chakra than anything else. The Lightning Cloak is probably Sasuke's most underrated technique. Now, it isn't anything as crazy as what the Raikage can use, but it's still no joke. By cloaking himself in lightning, Sasuke can significantly expand his speed, letting him keep up with faster and faster opponents. Sasuke's used this technique against pretty much everyone from Momoshiki to Ishiki. The reason it might not look as impressive is that Sasuke never actually calls out this technique, but still without it, he wouldn't have kept pace with the godlike aliens he faced in Boruto. CHIDORI. We've talked about all of its variants, and it was inevitable we talk about the real thing. The Chidori is one of the most iconic jutsu in Naruto, and probably Sasuke's most iconic jutsu by a mile. When it was first introduced, the Chidori was described less as a jutsu and more as an assassination technique. Coating his hand with lightning, Sasuke can drive a hole straight through anyone and anything he wants. We saw this in his fight against Gaara, where it broke through Gaara's seemingly indestructible sand shell. Sasuke spammed this technique pretty often since the first time he learned it. Now, it isn't nearly as bad as Naruto with his Rasengan, but every Sasuke fight has him using at least one Chidori. It's almost just as deadly as it ever was, seeing as how nobody wants to try tanking the thing, no matter how strong the villains in Naruto got. There's just one problem though: speed. The Chidori is only as fast as Sasuke himself. Now, that's usually fine. Sasuke is one of the fastest people on the planet by a mile. Unfortunately, villains eventually became a little too fast for Sasuke to reliably use the Chidori. Now, Sasuke can make up for it somewhat using Ameno Tajikara, but that does take a few points away from the technique. Alright, I'm just gonna say it, Kirin is definitely Sasuke's coolest jutsu, and it isn't even close. I mean, look at it, the thing is a gigantic lightning dragon. Using natural lightning in the sky, Sasuke can redirect it all into a giant dragon, throwing it at anyone he wants to make not exist anymore. Being real lightning, this technique is almost impossible to dodge and is impossible to absorb. It does take the setup to use, but that's basically its only drawback. It's also a technique Sasuke can use when he's completely out of chakra, since once the right conditions are set up, all he really has to do is direct the lightning. How much of a punch does the thing pack though? Well, when it was first used, it pretty much blew up the entire Uchiha hideout. The only reason Itachi didn't instantly die was that he had one of the most broken Susanos in the entire series. Later on, this thing was enough to even pin down Naruto's Kurama avatar. While it's only made a few appearances, they're enough for me to put it in the top 10. Every Uchiha has cheats when it comes to Genjutsu, and Sasuke is no different. Sure, he doesn't use it nearly as much as his brother used to, but Sasuke's Genjutsu feats are no joke. The most important time Sasuke uses his Genjutsu was definitely in his fight against Danzo. Here, Sasuke managed to convince the latter that he had more Sharingan to use in his Izanagi than he actually did, using his mistake to finally take him down. Just with a look, he managed to trap every single tail beast in a Genjutsu. Something so ridiculous surprised even the Sage of Six Paths. It's a shame Sasuke doesn't use this more, but it's still an important part of what makes him so strong. Space-time ninjutsu is one of the strongest abilities that anyone can have in Naruto. It allows the user to open portals to different dimensions. This thing is pretty much a guaranteed escape from any tricky situation. I mean, people can't exactly catch you if you travel to the other side of the world or go to a different planet altogether. It is slower than something like Kamui though, which does bring it down a bit. What really keeps this technique back though is that it uses a ridiculous amount of chakra. Pretty much anytime Sasuke uses this technique, you can be sure he won't be fighting at his full strength. This is something that's so prevalent, it's almost become a meme, and this jutsu is one of the reasons for it. Still, for all its uses, from rescuing Naruto to escaping from Jigen, I can't put it any lower on the list. I chose to include all the variations to this ability in one spot, or else half of this list would have been taken up by them. Flame Control, or Kagetsuchi, is Sasuke's ability to manipulate Amaterasu. With this jutsu, Sasuke can coat Susanoo's arrows, sword, or ribcage with the black flames. He can also combine it with his Bansho Tenin, as he did against Naruto, taking out multiple shadow clones at once. He can even go further than this, using his Flame Control to enhance the power of his Chidori. This is what he did against Madara, and in his final clash against Naruto, and the ensuing jutsu clash was enough to blow Naruto's arm off. All in all, Flame Control is pretty much just what the Amaterasu itself would be if it had a lot fewer weaknesses, so it more than earns a place in the top 5 of this list. At number 4, we have one of the strongest abilities of the Rinnegan, Chibako Tensei. Using the Rinnegan's gravitational powers, you can make a small orb that pulls everything towards it. This includes boulders, buildings, the earth, literally anything but the user. All of it meets at the orb, making a giant meteor that crushes everything that was unlucky enough to get caught up in it. I don't need to tell you that most people can't handle it. This will, after all, instantly destroy a shinobi village all on its own. What makes this technique really crazy though is that it's only as strong as the amount of chakra you put into it. Hagoromo used it to make the actual moon after all. Now Sasuke has never made one that big, but he has used it often enough. He used it to instantly seal all the tail beasts, while even someone like Nagato was struggling to seal away just a weaker version of the 9 tails. It's pretty safe to say that if Sasuke was fighting literally everyone on the planet besides Naruto, one Chibako Tensei would end the fight in the span of 2 minutes. Your only real hope of dodging the thing is to destroy the core, but even that gives Sasuke plenty of time to hit you with something else that will instantly kill you. The Amenete Chikara is one of the craziest abilities in all of Naruto, and for good reason. Sasuke can instantly swap places with anything if it's within a certain distance. That doesn't seem like it would be that big a deal, till you realize that he has plenty of instant kill moves, and the only problem has always been the fact that he needs to get close to using them. Thanks to this jutsu, he's also very hard to hit since he can always just teleport away if he ever feels like he needs to. Still, how broken could this thing be? This thing single-handedly made Sasuke more annoying than Naruto for Ishiki. There's a reason the Otsutsuki seemed like he was ready to pull his hair out every time Sasuke swapped places with something. The simple truth is that you just can't really counter this move. Your only hope is that you're somehow fast enough to dodge whatever Sasuke hits you with right after. If you're Ishiki, that's a real option. If you're anyone else, even someone like Momoshiki, it really isn't. Finally, we're talking about the Susanoo, also known as the ultimate defensive technique. The Susanoo is a gigantic chakra avatar that is almost impossible to break through. Yes, Kaguya and Ishiki managed to break through it, but how many other people can say the same? Strong enough to match the Kurama avatar in power and even resist the infinite Tsukuyomi, this Susanoo is one of the most versatile, being capable of flying and having attacks for both short and long range. Inside this avatar, Sasuke can use most of his most powerful techniques like shooting fireballs or making a gigantic version of the Chidori. Make no mistake, the Susanoo is easily one of the strongest techniques out there. This would be number 1 on the list if there wasn't something even more ridiculous coming up ahead. Now, we finally come to Sasuke's most powerful jutsu, and it's definitely something well beyond anything Sasuke has ever used since. Using a chakra of all tail beasts and combining it with his Susanoo, Sasuke's Susanoo takes on a new form. In this form, Sasuke can fire a single arrow, putting just about all of his chakra into it. Yes, the chakra from all 9 tailed beasts combined with the strength of the Susanoo, all in one lightning arrow. This technique is responsible for the single biggest jutsu clash we have ever seen in Naruto or Boruto. Just using this technique pretty much instantly drained Sasuke of most of his chakra, and was responsible for blowing up the entirety of Final Valley. This is the strongest technique Sasuke has ever used, and after his nerfs, it's safe to say it might be the strongest technique he will ever use. For that reason, it takes the #1 spot on this list. That's it for today. Let me know if I missed out on any techniques you think deserve a spot on this list. Also, feel free to drop suggestions down for future videos in the comments down below. It's AnimeScale out. Bye!